go into the room. In fact, I was talking to the deputies today, and they're just going to the door. If they go into the room for any reason, they have to put on full PPE, mask, shield, suit. Got to tape your gloves to the suit. I mean, it's like going to this highly infectious. So, but it felt good to be back out doing that.
That's awesome.
I've had a few of them come to church when they've gotten out. And then I've had a lot of them show back up in there.
I've worked with some guys over the years that spend more time out there than anywhere else.
Yeah.
And you're right, they know this.
Oh yeah, they know it inside and out. I got several out there right now. I told one today. He gotten back since June 22nd. And I said, man, you're doing life on an installment plan in here. And he looked at me and he said, you're not lying. He said, I got arrested and I got in here. And once I got sober, once I started thinking about it, he's probably 42, 43 years old. He has done 16 years worth of time in Livingston.
Oh my goodness.
That's a long time.
Especially for
That's
ladies.
broken.
That's a lot of your life.
Yeah.
That's broken up over 20-something years.
Yeah.
That's sad. But
It's sad.
at least he realizes, oh my goodness, I need
Well-
to do something different so I don't keep doing this.
When I thought about that, let's say he started when he was 16, 18 years old, and he's about 42, 43 now. More than half his life has been spent in that jail. But he doesn't know what else to do. He got 3 kids. I know one of his children. They used to come here. Beautiful.
Who's this?
Got to jail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
So just pray for him and try to help him.
Yeah, I probably worked with that guy over the years.
Well, y'all take work release, huh? Y'all get work release?
We don't do work release.
Y'all don't?
We don't do assigned chairs.
Thank goodness.
Somebody does down y'all's way.
I know across the river, IPS does.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
They do it
We
with
used to
West
do it in
Baton Rouge.
Walker At the Sunland has done that before too, I think.
They've got 3 now. I don't do a lot with work release. They got their own facility. And
I'm new to the church. So
it's private, it's a private owned company.
I probably seen it on there and it was
So.
Kind of short, black hair, long.
Well, hey, Brother Mark, how are you?
I'm okay. How are y'all? How are you?
Okay, I didn't know we did dinner on Wednesday night, so I rushed home from work and ate.
Don't do all that. We got dinner on Wednesday
What
night.
time do y'all do it?
6 o'clock.
I didn't know that.
I'm sorry. But this was the second night we started back.
Yeah, I knew you had.
It's been out for,
Will you come?
Since before
18 months.
COVID.
yeah, we
I was just glad to
quit.
leave work.
All right, the kids run
We quit the week that we were told to go into quarantine.
Jeepers.
Is everything okay?
Oh,
Yeah.
like you seen the lady from Afghanistan?
All right, I'll see y'all later.
Well, no, only that it changes every. Can't keep up.
They said that if it goes like Biden says, the 31st of August, they said it is going to be the biggest fallout this country has ever seen.
Well,
In terms of murder and slaughter and terrible pain.
I saw that if they keep the pace they are now, they're still going to leave about 11,000 Americans,
That's wrong.
which has never been done at any time in our military history ever.
They
Not
can't
even in
do
the
that.
Civil War did they leave that many
Right.
dead or wounded behind.
They need to get them
So
out.
it's,
Well,
They have a school group over there of about 35.
well, the thing, we need to get them out, but they're moving soldiers out because they know they're not going to have time to get them all out before the 31st. And their gear, they're taking gear this time.
but they're telling them
They're not.
to come to the airport and we'll get you out. These people can't get to
They can't get to the airport.
That's right, they
murder and
never
rape
get
trying to get to there.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
They have an aircraft carrier out that why don't we send in
Oh,
helicopters and get those people?
you're probably asking.
They are
You're probably
doing
asking
it
all
right
the
now.
questions
They are
that Congress has
sending
asked.
helicopters to get people out in remote areas.
Yeah, because they can't all get. They
You know how
can't
many
get to the
helicopter
airport.
sorties they've run doing that since it started? 6.
And you got to remember also that over the last 3 or 4 months, they've been warning these people this is about to happen. It didn't come overnight.
Yeah, but a lot
Mm.
of.
It seems like it did because
Yeah.
with that many people left over. Well, the way we look at the news, it's today's event, tomorrow's
Let me
event.
tell you what. There's no excuse for what's happening.
No.
there is.
None at all.
You're right, bro.
You don't put people in country with a job and then show up one day and say, man, it looks like the enemy's overrun our positions. You just got to kind of get every man for himself.
Right.
That doesn't happen
That's right.
with the United States military. It does not happen. But it did. So you got to ask, what in the world?
And they're going to blame Biden.
Well, he,
Well, there's a lot of sides to it. I don't want to.
And Trump made a deal with the Taliban, from what I hear.
No, you know how that happened? So they were supposed to pull out in May, and which would have occurred had there not been a change in political power in our country. But there was a change. So it was delayed. But it was delayed to a date that had political significance, not military significance. And everybody admits that. If you decide that you're going to pull out on 9/11, 20 years after what happened to us, that's not a military decision. That's a political decision. And when you start making you start using political decision making on the battlefield, and that's what it had become
Yeah.
when the Taliban began to overtake big swaths of the country, then you're going to make mistakes, because it's like cognitive dissonance. You know what cognitive dissonance is? Somebody that lights up a cigarette and knows that it's going to give them cancer and kill them.
Yeah, that's me.
All right, so how does that make sense in your mind? It doesn't.
Give a-
So you do all sorts of things to try to make sense of that. Oh, I can quit when I want. Oh, I'm going to be the one that doesn't get cancer. You can do
I
all
need to
sorts of
settle
things.
my nerves down. And
You
my
could-
kids make me crazy.
You can do all of those things and make everything feel just right while you're doing it. That is what's happening today. There's a way of saying, yeah, we're doing just fine. This is working. This is exactly the plan, and everybody knows there's no plan. So you pray for these people because they're in charge of our country for the next 3 years at least.
mm-hmm. It says
And,
here that Secretary Blinken, 82,300 people have been flown out of Kabul since August 14th, with an 11,000 remaining trying to get out.
It's a lot.
But that's not 82,000 Americans.
Well,
It's
that's
still, that's women and children. You
Yeah.
saw where those ladies were handing their babies
Yeah.
to the soldiers? Oh, that broke my heart.
And how would you like to be the last guy that closes the gate and knowing that you're leaving people behind? And your job is to protect Americans overseas. I just feel for all of them. It's just, nothing's going to be good about it. And they need our prayers, because only God overcomes these things. All right, my maps are working too.
Yes.
I'll bet you can't see them though. You'll have to get up and look at them. All right, so we're in chapter 19 of 1 Kings. Last week it was Elijah and the showdown at Mount Carmel. Remember, with the prophets of Baal? All right. So, and he outran the chariot at the end. It ends with the Lord energized Elijah with power. You can look on a topographical map of the area, and the way that the chariots would have had to run, they try to say it was really possible for Elijah to do that without, I guess, extraordinary power from God. But the Bible says what? That it was God that did it. So he runs this distance to Jezreel. Now, why they went to Jezreel is kind of unclear in Scripture, because Samaria, the city of Samaria, where the capital is, that seems to be where Jezebel was still at. And the thinking behind that is that the rain came such a deluge that that's as far as they could get, till the rain ceased a little bit, and then they could get on to Samaria.
Get off the mountain before they couldn't.
Yeah, they had to get out of there.
Where are we supposed to be?
All right. So 1 Kings chapter 19. So you kind of get some real pictures of what kind of leader Ahab is. Jezebel's running things, and he's just king in name only. So over and over we see that even Elijah's telling him, you go back and tell Jezebel. Okay, so Ahab's one of these people. He don't have any respect for himself, and he doesn't garner any respect from others. And in verse 1 it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, including a detailed account of how he killed all the prophets with the sword. So he gave the whole bloody account. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah with this warning: may the gods judge me severely if by this time tomorrow I do not take your life as you did theirs. All right. Big talk. Only Elijah must have believed it, right? Because Elijah was afraid. All right. So think about this for a minute. Since we started talking about Elijah, what's the first miraculous thing that occurs in Elijah's life? Anybody remember?
I would say when he didn't ever die, he was called up.
What was the last thing? Was it? No, we'll see. So what's the first thing?
He appeared out of nowhere and said, famine.
Okay. And then he goes off, and how is he fed in the desert?
Like by ravens, bread and water.
Okay.
And meat.
Ravens.
All right.
Twice a day.
So that happens to him. Pretty remarkable. Doesn't happen to everybody every day. Okay, and then what's the next thing that happens? He goes into pagan country, and God sends him to a woman there, a widow, and she feeds him. And because of that, God provides oil and flour that never runs out.
Right.
Okay? And then the next thing we know is that he's on his way.
He raised his son.
What's that? Raised his son from the dead. Okay? So that was highly significant. And then he shows up at Mount Carmel. He calls out all of Israel and all of the prophets of Baal. And he basically destroys Baal. They can't get Baal to do anything. Elijah prays to God, and he brings fire down on a water-soaked altar and consumes the altar, consumes the offering, consumes the water. All this has happened in a very short period of time. And then all that Ahab had to do was run back and say, Jezebel, look what Elijah did. And she says, I'm going to kill you. And he gets afraid. So now we got to take that apart. How does that happen to a person like Elijah? So Elijah was afraid. He got up and fled for his life to Beersheba in Judah. So Beersheba, if you go from Jezreel, never says he made it back to Samaria, all the way to Beersheba. Let's see, does that map show Beersheba? Oh yeah. So if you look all the way down on that map, that there to the bottom, right here, that's Beersheba. All right, you know, can you see where Jezreel is? Jezreel is way up here.
Oh, he ran a long way.
Man, when he was afraid, he was afraid. He got out of town. All right? So it's a pretty good ways. So he said Elijah was afraid. He fled to Beersheba in Judah. He left his son right back into the place that was the definition of fear for God's people. Remember what happened? They got to the promised land and they sent in the spies. And the spies came back and they said, bad people there, we can't go in. And Caleb and Joshua says, oh no, man, God's going to go with us, we can go in. But the people said, no, we're not going to happen. God got perturbed. And he sent a plague on them. A bunch of them died right then. Okay? And this desert for 40 years until all of you die off, all of you that are adult age. And then I'm going to take you people in. So because of their fear, they wandered for 40 days, for 40 years, till finally everyone passed away, and then Joshua was able to lead them in. Okay, Elijah's running back to that place. So he went and sat down under a shrub and asked the Lord to take his life. Now, what kind of person does that? Oh Lord, this is where it starts. I'm so important in this story that Jezebel wants me dead, and she's right. Okay, and this happens to people all through Scripture, actually, where they experience this wonderful, marvelous movement of God, and they've been a part of it. And so much so they've been a part of it that now they feel like they're indispensable in it. And so that's what he's saying. And we're going to pick up on more of that as we move on. He says, I've had enough. I've had enough. For that Elijah is very focused on himself here. He says, take my life. I've had enough. Now, O Lord, take my life. After all, I am no better than my ancestors. Thinking that here I am in this place of wandering, in this place of abandonment by you. So he's exhausted. He's emptied. Huh?
That's a long way to go.
Well, yeah. Yourself and you go right back to sleep. That is a sign of depression. And he is depressed. And why is he depressed? Because Jezebel's threatened to take his life. All right?
Well, that's kind of the first resistance that he met too along that journey.
Well, he could have died in the wilderness, but God fed him. God sends him to a hot, doesn't really welcome Jews, and he's taken care of there. He has a showdown on the mountain with Baal himself, or itself, or however you want to describe it. Things have gone pretty good for him. Weight in his life. And I think we do the same thing sometimes. God works.
How do you ignore the miracle that just took place there? You went to sleep hoping that you wouldn't come to in this on this. You get up and there's food from nowhere sitting there with a jug of water in the middle of the desert. And you just eat it and go to bed, go back to sleep.
Glory. Okay? And then God says, you can't see my glory and live. So he says, and so he says, as he passed by, God placed his hand between him and Moses. But we already know that Obadiah 100 in two groups of 50 in caves. Goes to see, he knows there's that many. But he's kind of, do this without me. And here they are, they're going to hunt me down and they're going to kill me. So you want to know why I'm here? Because they'll never find me here. I'm waiting. The Lord said, go out, Moses. All right? Digging into the mountain and causing the wind's blowing so hard, it's blowing rocks off the side of this mountain. Okay? But the Lord was not in the wind. Okay? So here's destruction, and it's exhibiting all of this power, but God doesn't reveal himself. Things apart. And that still doesn't reveal the power of God the way. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire, there was a soft whisper. When Elijah heard it, he covered his face with faith. Translate. Wasn't in the wind, wasn't in the earthquake, wasn't in the fire. And we know that he knows it's so that he won't die from being in the presence of. Why are you held down fire? God would have done that anyway. but that Elijah can overcome this. The thing about us that keeps us from being used by God in significant and powerful and miraculous ways is when we implode and become so focused on us that we will run for the hills, that we will identify everything going on around us and everybody that is around us as being less or having abandoned, and it's just me left now. So God can't do much with that person. Why is that?
There's no obedience.
And you're trusting yourself all of a sudden, right?
No obedience in God.
Yeah.
There's no faith.
Which is what he's about to shake him with.
That's right.
So he's, okay, so you're doing it your way. You think you've been doing it my way, but you've been doing it your way.
That, some other things, but, and I've talked to you about them. I am to you, and it's God. You can't stipulate it. There is no hope. You have to turn to Him. And recently I had something, and I tell you what, the other day the old devil was bothering me about it. I was on vacation. I was off that weekend. I hit me. The only way I know is God. I know that.
And I think that's what happens here. He experienced a lot of things going on, the miraculous to Elijah, but now something's got to happen internal.
Right.
Shaphat from Abel Mahala to take your place as prophet. So here he is. He's given him. You're going to go anoint this king in Syria. He's going to become king. You're going to anoint Jehu. He's going to become king, and then go find Elisha because he's about to take your place. Huh.
It's kind of a humiliating moment.
Well,
Humbling.
yeah. Jehu will kill anyone who escapes Hazael's sword, and Elijah will kill anyone who escapes Jehu's swords. I still have left 7,000 followers who have not bowed their knees to Baal or kissed the images of him. So Elijah is sadly mistaken. Not only is there 100 priests that Obadiah has been faithful to care for, there's 7,000 that God has that have never turned their heart to Baal. They have kept their heart turned to God. All right. So Elijah went from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 pair of oxen. Man. All right, y'all get that in your head? That's 24 oxen on a plow.
That'd be a big guy.
As a big guy, that's a big plow.
Yeah.
And he's breaking some heavy-duty ground, okay? He was near the 12th pair, meaning that he was working his oxen. The 12th pair would have been the last pair. He was near the 12th pair. Elijah passed by him and threw his robe over him. So he's thrown his mantle. It would have been a mantle. Kings and priests passed their authority on to another. Okay, so on the Day of Atonement, same thing. They would go into the temple. They would offer the sacrifice for everybody's sins, and then that was the last act the high priest would do for that year. And then then I will follow you. So he understands completely what's just happened. This is a prophet of God and a man of God, and knows what's going on. Indeed, what have I done to you? Meaning, are you sure you understand this? Elijah went back and took his pair of oxen and slaughtered them. He cooked the meat over a fire that he had made by burning the harness and yoke. He gave the people meat and they ate. Then they got up and followed Elijah and one chapter. But before we just run by and say goodbye to that.
I can definitely bring you to your knees and turn you around.
Yeah. And literarily, the writer is really kind to us because he provides us with these clues, the desert, Mount Horeb, the wandering, all of those things to relate to us what's actually going on with Elijah. And sometimes we need that in Scripture, especially when we come across a character like Elijah that, I mean, he don't die. He rides a chariot up into heaven, and he appears with Jesus at the Mount of Transfiguration. And we sometimes, when we aggrandize characters, and this kind of brings them back to earth and helps us realize that, first of all, he's not someone that was groomed for any of this. God just chose him. Like he chooses us. He just chose him, and there he was. And he was speaking the words that God put in his mouth. He was doing the things that God had given him the power to do. But yet, somewhere along the line, because of his own self-aggrandizement, he began to lose sight of just exactly what all that meant. And he finds himself in the place of fear, in that place of wandering, and then ultimately back to the place where God set everything right again for the children of Israel, and set everything right for Moses, and now he's set everything right again for Elijah. So now, King Ben-Hadad of Syria assembled all his army. All right, Ben-Hadad, we've come across that name before. This is a later Ben-Hadad. It's not the same one. Because that'll mess up your timetable really bad if you try to make it the same one. Now King Ben-Hadad of Syria assembled all his army along with 32 other kings with all their horses and chariots. He marched against Samaria, which is the northern kingdom, and besieged it and attacked it. So he made it where no one could go in or out. That's what besieged means. And then he launched an attack, an offensive attack. He sent messengers to King Ahab of Israel, who was in the city, and he said to him, "This is what Ben-Hadad says. Your silver and your gold are mine, as well as the best of your wives and sons." So this is a classic conquering tale here. He comes in, he basically lays the town impotent, and marches against it, and he says, the way out of this for you is to give me your best women, your best children, and all your gold and silver. I think that's interesting to call out your best wives and sons.
Wonder how many of them men had best wives.
I don't know if Ahab could ever have faced anybody and said, you're not the best or something, you know. But anyway, so the king Israel replied, "It is just as you say, my master, O king. I and all I own belong to you." So Ahab immediately, and without consulting Jezebel, I might add, agrees. I mean, what a wimp. This guy's the biggest wimp ever. So the messengers came again and said, "This is what Ben-Hadad says. I sent this message to you. You must give me your silver, gold, wives, and sons. But now, at this time tomorrow, I will send my servants to you, and they will search through your palace and your servants' houses. They will carry away all your valuables." So now, Ben-Hadad's up the ante. You agreed so quickly to all your gold and all your silver and your best wives and sons. He's going to say, let's see what else I can get away with here. Sounds like feckless poor leadership. Okay. The king of Israel summoned all the leaders of the land and said, "Notice how this man," he called him king before, okay, but now that he wants to take everything that he owns and not just his gold, silver, and best wives and sons, now he's calling him this man. Notice how this man is wait a minute. The king of Israel summoned all the leaders of the land and said, "Notice how this man is looking for trouble." Now he's calling it trouble. "Indeed, he demanded my wife's son, silver, and gold, and I did not resist him." So you hear what he's saying here? He asked for what was most precious to me, and I agreed. All the leaders of the people said to him, "Do not give in or agree to his demands." So he never gets to the second part of Ben-Hadad's thing. They come out and they say, "Don't agree to that." You know, after he's already agreed to it, he said, "Don't agree to those things." So he said to the messengers of Ben-Hadad, say this to my master the king. Now he's calling him the king again. I will give you everything you demanded at first from your servant, but I am unable to agree to the latest demand. All right, so this is kind of funny. So the messengers went back and gave their report. He says, okay, you can still have his wives and his sons and his silver and gold, but you can't go have the rest of the valuables. Like, what could be left that would be so valuable after that? So this is just a war of egos here, right? So we just had a war of egos. Elijah and who? God. Yeah, God won. Okay, so we get this little mini war of egos going on here between these two pagan kings. Ben-Hadad sent another message to him. May the gods judge me severely if there is enough dirt left in Samaria for all my soldiers to scoop up with their hands. So this is a euphemism from that period in time, okay, when you would level a town. That's what he's saying. I'm about to level you. There's not going to be enough dirt on a hill for my men to scoop up with their hands. All right. The king of Israel replied, tell him the one who puts on his battle gear should not boast like one who is taking it off. So that's another euphemism that says, you're about to be defeated. You're talking like somebody that's getting ready for battle, but what's actually going on here is that you're about to get whipped and you're going to wind up taking off your battle garb. When Ben-Hadad received this reply, he and the other kings were drinking in their quarters. He ordered his servants, get ready to attack. So they got ready to attack the city. So there's Ben-Hadad and 30 other kings, okay, that are involved in this thing. Now,
all for one town.
Yeah. Well, if you took Samaria, you got all the northern kingdom. That's just the way it went. So there would be an occupying force, or what they came to find out is that when your capital fell and there was no army left to protect the land, then the people were carried into exile, removed from the. Much easier to remove people from the land and move other people into that land than try to control people in their own land. So that was the way you conquered folks. Until Cyrus comes along, and Cyrus has a different idea about it. He lets them, and he says, look, just go home and live your life and pay your taxes, and I won't bother you. That's kind of what it was. So now, verse 13. Now a prophet visited King Ahab of Israel and said, do you see this huge army? Look, I'm going to hand it over to you this very day. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So here's a country that's been ravaged with idol worship. It's at this point where God would look and say, just had it with you, but God doesn't do that. So we've just come out of a reminder. We've been kept with these people. I'm not going to have anything to do with them anymore. And Moses says, no. And instead of the death wish that of the prophet, you're dead. Jack, you dead. Over to you this very day. Then you will know that I'm the Lord. Ahab asked, by whom will this be accomplished? And he answered, this is what the Lord has said, by the servants of the district governors. So you're going to go out ahead of these Social Security workers, and you're going to be the one to call out this huge army. So you beginning to get the picture? So Ahab assembled the 232 servants of the district governors. After he... All right, so does Ahab know that? All right. The servants of the district governors led the march. When Ben-Hadad sent the messengers, they reported back to him, men are marching out of Samaria, he ordered. Whether they come back or come in peace or do battle, take them alive. Okay, so Ben-Hadad's saying, I want this little army. I'm going to take them and I'm going to use them. Basically, he says, I want them alive so I can make them my servants. Each one struck down an enemy soldier. So each one of these servants struck down an enemy soldier. There's how many servants? 230. So this big army, and Israel chases them down. King Benhadad of Syria escaped on horseback with some horsemen. Then the king of Israel marched out and struck down the horses. What's the whole point of this exercise? For God to do what? To show himself
Faithful.
Yeah. I am going to hand this army or it over to you this very day. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So God is the Lord, not just their Lord, the Lord. Of course, security workers out front. Yeah, and I'm going to win the battle. Okay, so you would think that at the end of this paragraph, there'd be great. So they made a treaty with him, and they dismissed him. Now, why is this story in the Bible? We got a little bit of time.
God can turn the heart of evil.
Okay, so the purpose, you'll know that I'm the Lord your God. And what comes out of it?
Mercy.
Faithfulness.
An economic treaty.
Oh.
None of it nearly rises to the idea that God is being revealed here and recognized for what he's done. What they're recognizing is, oh, this thing's over. I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll give you the cities back that my father took, and you can set up and do trade in Damascus like we've been doing in Syria, and everything will be okay. And where's God in that picture?
No.
They don't need God anymore. God provided the means for the treaty. In their minds, this is what's happened, see? Does that make sense?
It does.
So God is there. He's told them twice. So that you will know that I'm God. They're not even acknowledging that he's done anything. In fact, he's letting his enemy live. He never got it. He never got it, not once. And every time he had a chance, it's like, oh, wait, I see a better way here than it would be if everyone began to worship God because of this. That's not going to get me anything. This is kind of his attitude. All right? So Elijah's going to anoint another man king of Syria, and that's coming, okay? And Jehu's going to become king, okay, of Israel. And the prophetic deal may be the 100. And Obadiah, behind the scenes, is kind of orchestrating their coming and going because he serves in Ahab's house, remember? So one of the men, Lord, please wound me. But the man refused to wound him. So the prophet said to him, because you have disobeyed the Lord, as soon as you leave me, a lion will kill you. When he left him, a lion attacked and killed him. Okay. So God's not playing around. He found another man and said, wound me. So the man wounded him severely. We don't know what kind of wound it is. It didn't kill him, but it's pretty bad. The prophet then went and stood by the road waiting for the king, King Ahab. He also disguised himself by putting a bandage down to do anything about it. Everything else is going to be manipulative. I don't care who's in charge, because that's who we are as broken, fallen, corrupt people. The only way out of that is to surrender all of that to God and say, okay, this is yours now. We made a mess. But he looks at that and says, no, you think this is a mess. You know, it's bad, but it's not. It's not anything permanent. Permanent comes later, when I've had enough, and it'll all be swallowed up into the the guy used to come to church here, lives down the road.